Squatch Senior here with an update on the Super M project. As you can see, I've been doing some taping here, getting the openings all taped over, getting the block ready for paint. Another thing I've been doing today is on the front pulley installation. Now, if you guys remember, I did have some serious galling going on here. It was right in this area, probably hard to pick it up. It turned out pretty good. And if you remember, I could not get the nut off. There is a previous video explaining how I did that. Here's the old nut. As you can see, I drilled a hole in the face, took a chisel, split it, and it helped me get that off. And we did source a new nut. Excellent condition. Threads are good. Trouble I had was getting this to screw on. I got everything all here now, so it all spins right on, but I couldn't even hardly start it before. And what I did there to get the threads in shape, I do have this kind of a fancy, pretty well used up file here that's pretty sharp. You can get in the grooves, and also a thread file. Number of different pitches on the file. This is a 16 threads per inch pitch on this, so that's the one I used. And what you do, you just set that on and it matches the thread, and you can just file all your burrs and stuff out with that. Anyway, the problem I had is I could not get this nut to go on smoothly. So another trick I use is valve grinding compound. As you can see, I've got kind of a selection here. Stuff I picked up at swap meets here, stuff I picked up out of the store. Like the old stuff better. Both these tins, coast to coast. How long has it been since you guys seen a coast to coast store? Anyway, this is an oil mix. You got fine on one side. It's a double tin with coarse on the other side. And to thin this out, you just mix a little oil with it, which what I did, I took a little, made a little slurry. I put on the threads here. And then what you do, you just put the nut on. And when you find a tight spot, it's just like grinding a valve. You just start working it back and forth till it gets smooth, go a little more. And as you can see, this thing spins right on. And the fit is perfect. Very little, if any, play in that nut. So there is a good tight thread on that. And as you can see, I made myself a baffle here, punched it out. Keep any filings from anything going back into the seal area and bearing area. So that turned out real good. Another thing we did is this pin. I'll get the pulley and stuff put on here, and then I'll explain to you what we had to make for that. Now we have the front pulley installed. Next up, this unit does have a Charlene power steering unit on, and the drive pulley for the pump goes on the outside of that. And what that does, this here's machined on the inside of the pulley here to go to the outside here, and that centers the pulley with the crankshaft. So we'll get that installed. Now to hold this pulley on, there's a pin goes through. What we had to start with, they had two roll pins. One halfway each way. Well, these things were cocked in there like that. I didn't like that, and I'm surprised this didn't fall apart. So, Squatch, what he did, we made us a new pin, proper length, took it in on a milling machine, milled a flat on it, and also made a dimple for the set screw. This does have a set screw to hold it in. The trouble we had with a totally round, we could put it in, but we could not get it all the way through, because as you can see, it would hit in this area right here. So what we did, we milled the flat, it slides right in. We'll get her so the set screw hole lines up. And what it does is this pulley works on a cam action. It just cams right into that pin, and that's what holds it in position. And just the tension on the drive of the system keeps that tight. Anyway, I think that's going to work out a whole lot better than them two roll pins that was in there. So anyway, that should be the installation of the front pulley, all the little tricks I used to get it there. And it's one of them little details things that usually takes you half a day to get done. Time to get the engine off the stand here. Right now got it hooked onto the cherry picker. We will be painting it on the cherry picker. Got a swivel hook. We can get her up farther to get the bottom side real good. We could swivel it, whatever we need to do. But first I need to get the back plate on the engine here. And what you got to do first is make sure you got all your passages plugged for oil. This is a through passage here. I've got that plugged already. I need to put the expansion plug in the back of the cam. What that is a concave piece here. You put a sealer on the outside edge and you take a punch, push the center in, and it will expand it into the block. Now it may look to you guys like the back of the cam here is rusty, but that's the color of the cam. It's kind of a copper color, so don't worry about that. We'll be just fine there. So let's get this plug in. For a sealer, I'm going to be using a Forma gasket sealant from Permatex 2A. It's a non-hardening pliable sealant. So let's get that expansion plug in. Okay, got the sealer around the edge. We'll see if we can tip that in there without making a too big mess out of it. My big brass drift here. Make sure it's seated in there first. Sounds good and solid. So we'll just hit her in the center. Okay. Things should work right there. Check her one more last time. That should be the last place that would have a possible oil leak. So we'll let that set a little bit and we'll get that black back plate on here. Okay, I've got the back plate mounted here. One thing you got to make sure, it's got 2 alignment dowels. It keeps this here plate lined up where it bolts onto the bell housing and keeps your whole drivetrain lined up. So we'll finish tightening this down. Okay, getting close to prepped. Probably block and tape the backside of this off yet, but still got to wipe the block down. But for the most part, she's ready for paint.
Just rode out a storm. Old Blue there usually always sits in this spot right here. And about 15 minutes ago, I moved it over to slightly more open ground, anticipating, well, we had some pretty severe winds just came through. Right here, top comes out of this oak tree there. It's kind of going, it's kind of nasty and rotten. And it would have landed perfectly across Old Blue's box. You can see the dirt patch right here where that thing sits all the time. So we saved it again. Well, it's the next day. I started out this morning by getting rid of that top, so already starting out behind the 8-ball, you know, but we got that out of the way. So now we're prepping for the priming and painting process on the Super M, and this is Saturday, so this is likely going to be paint prep day. We're going to be doing the last of like the surface prep, degreasing, getting all the dust off of everything, and getting a lot of things set out ready for paint. Heavy steel table here. It's going to take a few pieces. Tractor's been out moving stuff around. We got some more table stuff set up out there. We're probably going to move a lot of stuff out here, paint in front of the garage here, utilize the apron, stuff like that. So I've started masking a little bit on the back end. So you can see we've got the bell housing on there. Front end is masked off. I masked the bores where the clutch fork shaft is going to pivot. I'm going to leave just the glip towel sticking out through these areas. They all have those plugs that snap in anyway, but I figure primer and paint can just cover over those, make it all blend anyway. Plugged the starter hole, and we've got corks put in all of these threaded holes that are not utilized for anything. I went to all the trouble of cleaning all of those up. So the old factory procedure was to install corks in those threaded openings to keep them clean, free of debris, grit, dirt, whatever, until the day comes where they may need to be used. Around to the back, you can see I got the PTO installed. That was a pretty simple process, so I didn't bother filming that. I'm going to mask off the 6-spline shaft because having paint on there just balls up when you try and put any kind of a coupling on there. I would rather contend with a bare metal right there that we can just keep a little bit of oil or grease on and just re-clean as needed if we ever need to use it. We rarely ever use the PTO on this, but now that we actually have one that has a good engagement lever and isn't a complete pain, we might find more reasons to use it. I've also masked the pivot areas for the brake and clutch pedal shaft. That has been done on each side. I got this one ready too. Up top you can see I did some pre-painting on the spring and the washer and cotter pin assembly for the shifter right here, just to get some color in these places where I didn't think I was really going to be able to get it well from spraying it all assembled. And you can see it looks a little bit dull, and that's because you don't want to paint over a glossy surface. There isn't enough basically imperfections in the surface for the paint to stick well. So you just take a Scotch-Brite pad like this, just go around, and it just scuffs it enough. It puts all kinds of little micro abrasions on that surface that there is a conducive, basically prepped area for that new paint, new primer, whatever to stick to. If you don't do that, it could lift and peel and crack and separate at that spot, look kind of funny. So that's why that has been done up that way. I've also got masking on both of the rear axle shafts out just far enough that I shouldn't have to worry about overspray getting any further than this. And that HVLP gun I have is pretty well controlled, so I bet my overspray only goes about this far anyhow. Plus I'm keeping these bare metal out here because we're going to roll this out on the apron to paint it, and then we're going to take it off of this stand. These drawbar brackets and everything are coming off to open this up a little bit and to get better coverage. So we're going to need a place to put the jack and then a place to have it rest on jack stands. So we're leaving that bare out here because we just really don't need to go that far with it. One other thing I have to address on here. This top cover has a few funny spots in the casting. You can see this right here, and there's it's kind of a flashing that goes in here with a little bit of a void down under there. We have another one right here. You can see they're still weeping oil. This was kind of oily here because that hydraulic unit that attaches in this spot had been leaking for years, and these voids have picked up a little bit of oil. We got kind of another little funny spot right here. Kind of blisters in this cast. I think they might have had gas bubbles forming and coming out that weren't venting really properly when they poured this. So probably the best course of action with this is to actually heat this with some flame and just burn some of that oil out of there. We can't have this stuff seeping out underneath primer or paint because you'll spray this. Even if I surface prep this and get what's on the surface off, you'll spray it, and then more of this stuff will leach out, and you'll have what looks like a wet paint spot in each of these areas. So you can come back even after everything's dry, and you'd probably be able to wipe it off with a rag back down to bare metal because nothing will adhere once that oil starts mixing with that paint. So I'll see if I can't get these things cooked out and cleaned up a little bit. That heat is loosening the top surface of these blisters. You can see we're still finding oil under there. So I'm just going to keep working at these things, see if I can get them peeled off of here as long as I'm at it, because we're nice and solid underneath. But these interesting little discs are in here too. I don't know if they had a little reinforcement spot. I noticed when I had this top cover off, you can see similar discs in the same spot on the backside, like we got little rods that go through there or something. I don't know. I'm not a casting expert, just some curious oddities here. So one thing that IH is known for is having kind of rough castings, so I guess this just fits right in. Alright, so I was able to get most of that blister scab off of there, and I got all of that oil cooked out of those places. And as long as I was at it, I took the surface prep and just went over this entire rear end right here. It looks like it was fairly clean, but you still get, well, you can see all the old paint dust and rust dust and the odd little patch of grease. Quite a bit of stuff still comes off of these castings. So we've got this one prepped. We're going to leave it alone. Don't touch it with your bare hands from this point on. I'll take the prep over here. My next project is going to be the engine right here. Senior had masked quite a bit of these places. I masked the flywheel. Got that pretty much all covered. It is fully installed. Pilot bearings in, bolts are in, locks are folded. I'm going to continue to mask around this back plate here. I'll hold it in probably 1/4 of an inch to get a little bit of wraparound on the paint, so that when you bolt this up, there's not going to be any exposed metal strips in case items don't overlap perfectly. So that's going to be the standard routine for the rest of the day. I got quite a few parts here, a lot of pieces back there, as you guys have seen. Just going to be a lot of boring work like that. We'll touch base again when I've got most of it done. Well, we did it again. Got everything out here prepped and ready to go. You can see, once again, sun is starting to get low in the sky. So, day's just about come to an end. But we got everything for the rear end prepped. Whole front axle prepped. Everything on the engine masked and prepped. Degreased, cleaned, ready for paint. Bolster, belt pulley, distributor down there. Hydraulic block. There's some hardware for anchoring the belt pulley to the painting table. Front end bracket, side channels, pedals, and just all kinds of stuff. Water pump, thermostat housing, drag links, some miscellaneous stuff that's going to be hung. This stuff that already has hooks on is all going to hang. Anchored the oil filter to that block of wood right there. We got the governor, we got some steering stuff. Engine mount blocks, just everything here is slated to get primer on. Maybe not these wheel hubs though. Senior, he got a wild hair today and decided he wanted to go scratch on these things, and I said, by all means, go to it. I am so tired of getting dirty scraping these things down, but he did a pretty good job on these things. Got both the center hubs cleaned up, the locks and the bolts. I don't know that we're going to be doing any primer on those because we're going to need to slap those onto those axles to get that stuff, or to get that rear end rolled back in here after we've got primer on it. But so that was pretty much all day. Took me that long to get all the stuff surface prepped and ready to go, but we got a pretty decent batch of work lined up for the morning. So I'm calling it out here tonight. That's going to be the end of this video. This was day one of, well, what's going to be, I'm hoping, a 3-part series on painting this tractor. So we finally got all the last of the preps done. Tomorrow we spray primer.